The FBI just found something. Not a new witness, not a tip from the public, not another piece of clothing near the crime scene. Something they found in the footage that has been public since February. Something visible in the very first images released to the world. Something that every news channel, every expert panel, every true crime creator covering this case walked right past without stopping to explain. Something in his pocket. And when you understand what that object is, when you understand what it does and why bringing it to Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood that night transforms everything about how this crime was planned and executed, you will not be asking who took her. You will be asking how this was allowed to happen. But before we get there, I need to ask you 3 questions. 3 questions that 6 weeks of coverage, 55,000 tips, 400 investigators, and a $1 million reward have never answered clearly. Question 1. If multiple neighbors in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood lost their internet connection on the night of February 1st, at the exact same time, in the exact same window, why has nobody explained what caused that? Question 2. If the camera belonging to the couple who lived directly next to Nancy, close enough that their lens faced her front door, simply showed footage that was unavailable during the precise hours she disappeared, what made it unavailable? Question 3. If the FBI went back to that neighborhood 33 days into a federal investigation and went door to door asking every resident not about the suspect, not about vehicles, not about sounds, but specifically about their internet service on the night Nancy vanished, what exactly are they looking for? 3 questions. 1 answer, and that answer is sitting in a pocket, in footage the entire world has already seen. Not a burglar who panicked, not a stranger acting on impulse, not someone who drove past a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night and made a decision he had not already made weeks before he arrived. What showed up at Nancy Guthrie's door on February 1st had been planning this. And the device in that pocket is the single most important detail in this entire investigation. And it is the detail nobody has fully explained. Until now, stay with me. Because by the time this video ends, you will not just understand what happened in those 41 minutes of darkness. You will understand exactly how it was engineered. And you will understand why the person who engineered it left a trail that the FBI is now closing in on from 3 directions simultaneously. Before the device, before the signal, before the 41 minutes of darkness and the blood on the porch and the pacemaker that went silent at 2:28 in the morning. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of 3, grandmother, a woman who had lived in her home in the Catalina foothills outside Tucson, Arizona for 5 decades. A woman described by the Pima County Sheriff himself as sharp as a tack. A woman who attended virtual church services every Sunday morning from her living room. Not because she had to, but because faith was not something she performed. It was something she lived. She had limited mobility. She required daily cardiac medication. She wore a pacemaker that transmitted her heart rhythm wirelessly to her medical team, a small device invisible to everyone around her that would become one of the most critical pieces of forensic evidence in a federal investigation that eventually involved more than 400 assigned investigators and 55,000 tips. She was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognized faces in American broadcast journalism, a daughter who has stood in front of cameras for 6 weeks and begged and refused to stop believing. But here's what the coverage has gotten wrong from the beginning. Nancy Guthrie was not just a connection to someone famous. She was someone herself. She had dinner with her family. She had a routine so consistent, so known, so predictable that the people who loved her noticed within hours when she did not show up. She had 5 decades of life inside the walls of that house in the Catalina foothills. She had a heart that a machine monitored wirelessly because her body needed that support. And that machine, that pacemaker, that small device tracking her pulse in the dark, became the last confirmed signal of her existence on the night of February 1st. At 2:28 in the morning, it went silent. She deserves better than what happened on that porch. Her family deserves the truth. And that truth, built from confirmed physical evidence, forensic pathology, behavioral analysis, and what the FBI is now quietly uncovering, is far more calculated than anything you have been told. Before we go further, something important. Everything you are about to hear is drawn entirely from publicly available reporting, from NBC News, Fox News, NewsNation, CNN, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and the FBI's own public statements and releases. All sources are linked in the description below. This video is an analysis of publicly available evidence and expert opinion. It is not a statement of confirmed fact. Where investigators have confirmed something, we will say confirmed. Where experts have offered theory or opinion, we will say theory. Where something is still being investigated, we will say exactly that. This channel does not speculate beyond what the evidence supports. We do not accuse individuals. We do not confirm conclusions that investigators have not confirmed. We present what the public record shows, and we ask the questions that the public record demands. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is active. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. If you have information, please use it. Now, the evidence. Here is what confirmed forensic evidence has established. Not theory, not speculation. Confirmed. On the evening of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie had dinner with her daughter Annie and Annie's husband. Family dropped her home afterward. The garage door closed at 9:50 in the evening. The neighborhood went quiet. At 1:47 in the morning, her doorbell camera went offline. Not a glitch, not a power failure, not a technical malfunction. The physical device was removed from its mount. Deliberately, by a masked figure who covered the lens with vegetation before disconnecting it. A person who had mapped that camera before they arrived. A person who had already decided, days or weeks earlier, that the first thing they would do when they reached that porch was make it blind. That is not impulse. That is a sequence. And sequences are rehearsed. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker application lost its Bluetooth connection to her phone. 41 minutes. That is the entire operative window of this crime. From the first forensic event to the last, 41 minutes from the moment the camera went dark to the moment the pacemaker went silent. And inside those 41 minutes, on the front porch of a house where a woman had lived for 5 decades, investigators found blood. Not inside the house. On the porch. DNA confirmed as Nancy's. Drops examined by forensic experts who described their shape with clinical precision. Little pale centers. What forensic pathologists call donut shapes. The pattern consistent with blood that falls from the nose or mouth during a physical struggle. Blood mixed with air as it drops. Blood that forms that distinctive center void because of the force and the angle of the fall. Something violent happened to Nancy Guthrie on that porch. Something fast, something forceful enough to cause bleeding from the face. And it happened within those 41 minutes of darkness between a disabled camera and a disconnected pacemaker. Now hold that porch in your mind. Hold the blood. Hold the 41 minutes. Hold the camera that was not malfunctioning, but physically removed by someone wearing gloves who had planned to remove it. And now hold this, the detail that transforms everything. The neighbor who lived directly next to Nancy Guthrie. The couple whose property sat close enough that one of their 4 cameras faced her front door. That camera, the one nearest to Nancy's home, showed footage that was simply not available during the overnight hours of February 1st. Not corrupted, not damaged, not a storage error. Not available. The neighbor's word for it was uncanny. Think about that word carefully. A camera that goes dark during a random overnight hour is a technical glitch. A camera that goes dark during the precise 41-minute window in which the woman next door is taken, only that camera, out of 4 on the same property, is not a glitch. It is a target. It means someone knew which camera to blind, and blinded only that one. And the engineering of those 41 minutes of darkness begins with something that was visible in the very first images the FBI released. Something in a pocket. Look at the doorbell footage. The FBI released it. The images are public. They have been analyzed frame by frame by retired agents, former profilers, forensic technology experts, and millions of viewers who have followed this case from the beginning. Most of the analysis focused on what was expected. The mask, the gloves, the backpack, the holster. The way he covered the camera with his hand, the build, the height, the possible wrist tattoo glimpsed in the gap between glove and sleeve. But something else is in those images. Something in his pocket, an antenna-like object, a protrusion that former FBI agents and forensic technology experts have now publicly identified as potentially one of two things: a handheld radio or a signal jammer. And the difference between those two possibilities is not technical. It is the difference between a crime that was coordinated and a crime that was coordinated and digitally engineered. Here is what a Wi-Fi jammer does. It is not complicated technology. It does not require military training or government clearance. It can be purchased online. It fits in a pocket. And when activated, it blocks every wireless device within its range, from connecting to any network, Ring cameras, Google Nest devices, security systems that depend on Wi-Fi to upload footage. Every wireless connection in its radius goes dark, simultaneously, instantly. It is illegal in the United States under Federal Communications Commission guidelines. Illegal to own, illegal to operate, illegal to sell to someone who intends to use it. And that illegality matters, not just because it adds charges, but because illegal devices leave purchase trails that legal purchases never create. Now, 3 confirmed facts. Fact 1. The neighbor directly adjacent to Nancy Guthrie's home, the couple with 4 cameras on their property, told NBC News that the camera nearest to Nancy's home showed footage that was simply not available during the overnight hours of February 1st, during the exact window Nancy disappeared. The neighbor called it uncanny. Here's what that word actually means. A camera that goes dark during a random overnight hour is a technical glitch. A camera that goes dark during the precise 41-minute window in which the woman next door is taken, only that camera out of 4 on the same property, is not a glitch. It is a target. That is not a broad jamming signal. That is something more precise, more deliberate, more frightening. Fact 2. Multiple other neighbors confirmed to investigators and then confirmed to reporters that their internet connections experienced disruptions and glitches on the night of February 1st. Not one neighbor. Multiple. In the same area. On the same night, during the same window. Fact 3. On March 5th, 33 days into a federal investigation, the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department returned to that neighborhood, door to door. And the question they asked was not about the suspect's appearance, not about vehicles, not about sounds. They asked whether residents had noticed disruptions to their internet service on the night Nancy went missing. The FBI does not go back to a neighborhood 33 days into a federal investigation to ask about internet service because the question is interesting. They ask because the answer connects to something they have already found. Because a signal device used in that neighborhood on that night would not just explain the missing footage. It would confirm that what arrived at Nancy Guthrie's door was not a criminal acting on instinct. It was an operation. A burglar brings a crowbar, a kidnapper brings rope, but someone who brings a device specifically designed to make a neighborhood go digitally blind at the precise moment they need darkness. That person does not improvise, does not escalate, does not panic. That person executes. When Sheriff Chris Nanos was asked directly whether the suspect may have had a Wi-Fi jammer visible in his pocket in the doorbell footage, his answer was exact. He said his team had looked at it with the FBI from every angle. Every angle. The sheriff of Pima County does not say every angle unless every angle is worth examining. That is not a dismissal. That is confirmation that the question is alive inside the investigation. And if what was in that pocket was a signal device, if the digital darkness that fell over that neighborhood on the night of February 1st was engineered rather than accidental, then the most important question in this entire case is not who was on that porch. It is who was on the other end of the signal. There is something the coverage has mentioned but never fully built on. 2 DNA profiles, not one. 2 separate DNA profiles recovered in connection with this crime. One from biological material connected to gloves found discarded 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, gloves visually consistent with those worn by the masked suspect in the doorbell footage. One from biological material recovered inside the residence itself. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed it. 2 profiles, 2 different people, neither matching any member of the Guthrie family. neither matching anything in CODIS, the FBI's national database of convicted offenders. 2 people. A crime that required 2 people is not an impulsive crime. It is not a burglary gone wrong. It is not one stranger acting alone in the dark. 2 people requires coordination before February 1st ever arrived. It requires trust built over time. It requires a plan that assigned specific roles to specific individuals before either one set foot on that property. And now consider the device in the pocket again. Former FBI agents examining the footage have raised the possibility that what appears to be an antenna-like object could be a handheld radio rather than a jammer. A radio used to communicate with someone not visible in the footage. Someone positioned elsewhere, near a vehicle, at the perimeter, outside the frame of every camera that captured anything that night. A handheld radio means real-time communication during the operation. It means the person on the porch was not working alone even in those 41 minutes. It means someone was listening, someone was watching. Someone had a role that night that kept them invisible, and whose DNA ended up inside that residence anyway. 1 person on the porch, 1 person somewhere else. 2 roles, 2 DNA profiles. 1 plan that took weeks to build and 41 minutes to execute. And both of those profiles are now inside a federal evidence file being processed through genealogical DNA testing. The same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer after 4 decades of anonymity. The same science that builds family trees branch by branch from partial matches in commercial databases, from the voluntary submissions of millions of Americans who uploaded their DNA without any awareness of what it would eventually be connected to. The science does not care how carefully this was planned. It is running, and it does not stop. So who plans something like this? Who spends weeks, possibly months, studying a neighborhood, mapping camera positions, researching a pacemaker's Bluetooth range, acquiring a device that blinds wireless networks, coordinating a second person with an assigned role, rehearsing the sequence, and then executing it in 41 minutes of engineered darkness? Not a burglar. Tracy Walder spent years as an FBI special agent in counterterrorism before crossing into the CIA. Her career was built around one specific discipline, understanding how violent people plan and execute crimes designed to terrorize and control. She said clearly that she does not believe this was a burglary gone wrong. In a burglary, the goal is simple. Burglars want one thing: property. They want to be invisible and fast. They do not take people. They do not add a breathing, moving, noise-making human being to their exit plan. Because the moment you take a person, you have converted a theft into a federal abduction. You have converted a potential parole into a potential life sentence. That is not a decision anyone makes by mistake. And then she said something that reframes the entire motive structure of this case. She said she believes this crime happened because of something Savannah Guthrie did, or because of how someone felt about Savannah Guthrie. Obsession or retaliation. 2 different threat profiles. 1 conclusion. This was personal, not about Nancy, about the person Nancy was connected to. Think about what that means operationally. Savannah Guthrie lives in New York. She moves inside the infrastructure of a major television network. She is visible, protected, surrounded. She cannot be easily reached. But her mother lives alone in a quiet neighborhood outside Tucson. Her mother's address is findable. Her mother's routine is observable. Her mother has no security detail, no panic room, no staff between her and whoever comes to her door in the dark. You cannot reach Savannah Guthrie, not easily, not directly, but the people she loves, they are reachable. And whoever did this understood that the most powerful thing you can do to someone who is protected is to go after the person their protection cannot cover. It is to go after the person they love most. Nancy Guthrie was not the target. Nancy Guthrie was the message. And someone constructed that message with patience, with calculation, with the kind of cold, methodical planning that does not come from anger, because anger does not produce a signal device. Anger does not produce a coordinated 2-person operation with assigned roles. Anger does not produce 30 days of surveillance before a 41-minute execution. What produces that? Something colder, something that looked at Savannah Guthrie's world, her protection, her visibility, her distance, and calculated that the most accessible, Most devastating point of contact was not Savannah. It was the woman who raised her. The woman who lived alone. The woman whose Sunday routine never changed. That calculation, that cold, patient-specific targeting of an 84-year-old woman as a message to her daughter, is the most disturbing detail in this entire case. Not the blood, not the device, not the missing footage, or the unconfirmed ransom notes. The most disturbing detail is that someone sat somewhere and thought this through, and arrived at Nancy. What they did not account for, what no amount of planning could fully account for, is that the evidence they left behind does not disappear because the cameras went dark. Blood does not disappear. DNA does not disappear. Purchase records for illegal devices do not disappear. Cell tower data does not disappear, and family trees built from genealogical databases do not stop growing because the person who seeded them never consented to the search. The case is not going cold. A dedicated task force has been formed. 5 Pima County Sheriff's Department detectives working alongside FBI agents full-time on this investigation and nothing else. The FBI returned to the neighborhood on March 5th not because the investigation was stalling, but because new lines of inquiry had opened, lines that connect directly to what neighbors reported about their internet connections. Lines that connect to what was in that pocket. Retired FBI agent Jason Pack put it precisely. What looks quiet from the outside is the investigative cycle turning. As cell phone records return, as Walmart purchase data is analyzed, as the suspect's clothing is traced through retail channels, the timeline tightens. And suddenly, a neighbor's answer that seemed irrelevant 4 weeks ago falls into place around a detail that was there from the very beginning. Think about what that means for a signal device. Wi-Fi jammers are illegal in the United States, not regulated, illegal. Under FCC guidelines, owning one, operating one, or selling one to someone who intends to use it is a federal offense. That illegality does not just add charges. It makes the device traceable in ways a legal purchase never would be. Investigators can subpoena online marketplaces, trace shipping records, follow payment trails, identify the geographic origin of a purchase, and cross-reference it with cell tower data from February 1st. A device bought online leaves a digital fingerprint that connects a screen to an address to a name. And that name, if it connects to a person whose DNA already sits in a federal evidence file, closes a loop that the ransom notes were designed to keep open forever. The genealogical DNA testing is running on both profiles simultaneously. The cell tower data is in federal hands, the backpack, the holster, the clothing, all being traced through retail and resale channels that leave records. The quiet you are seeing is not the investigation going cold. It is the investigation going deep. And deep investigations, built on forensic science and genealogical databases and digital purchase records rather than tips and press conferences, do not announce themselves until they are ready to close. 3 questions. I asked you 3 questions at the beginning of this video. Why did multiple neighbors lose their internet connection on the night of February 1st? Why was the camera closest to Nancy's home simply unavailable during those 41 minutes? Why did the FBI go back 33 days later and ask specifically about internet service? One answer: something in a pocket, something illegal. Something specifically designed to create digital darkness at the precise moment that darkness was needed. Something that is now at the center of an active FBI investigation, closing in from 3 directions: genealogical DNA, digital purchase records, and cell tower data that maps every signal in that neighborhood on the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Not a burglar who panicked, not a stranger acting on impulse, not someone who improvised, someone who knew which camera to disable and how. Someone who brought a device that may have turned off the digital vision of an entire neighborhood for exactly as long as they needed it dark. Someone who had a partner. Someone who had a plan. Someone who had been watching long enough to know that 41 minutes was all the time they needed. And someone who left blood on a porch. DNA at a scene. And a purchase record inside a database that investigators are now closing in on from both ends. The genealogy tracing backward through family trees, and the retail trail tracing forward through transaction records for a device that is illegal to own, illegal to operate, and impossible to buy without leaving something behind. Nancy Guthrie deserves the truth. Savannah deserves it. Annie deserves it. Cameron deserves it. Every member of that family who has stood in front of cameras and begged and refused to stop believing, they deserve to know what the evidence already knows. And the evidence is pointing at a door. When that door opens, it will not open quietly. If you know anything, anything at all, the tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. It is in the description. The detail that ends this may be sitting in someone's memory right now, attached to a conversation they heard, a purchase they witnessed, a device they saw in someone's possession that did not make sense until right now. Drop a comment, tell us what you think was in that pocket. Tell us what you think this was really about. This community sees things that investigations miss. And your analysis matters more than you know. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the answer to what really happened to Nancy Guthrie is not weeks away. It is one genealogy match away, one purchase record away, one person deciding their silence is no longer worth holding. That moment is coming, and when it does, everything in this video will fall into place around a name that investigators may already have circled, not a burglar who panicked. Not a stranger acting on impulse, someone who engineered this, and someone who left far more behind than they ever intended.